Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Sean Epperson, game developer, publisher, co-founder of Thing 12 Games, which formed in 2016. Since then, they've published and manufactured 5 games: Dice of Crowns, Dice of Pirates, Click Click Boom, Seals of Cthulhu, and their newest title, Dinos Not Assembled. Sean, welcome to the Binge. How you doing?
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited to be here.
Hey, it is. I get excited having guests on. I find sometimes I'm more excited than even the guests to come on because I get to talk to some cool people, learn some new things, and certainly being publishers of 5 games now. Obviously, you guys have built up a bit of a knowledge base that it's always kind of cool to tap into and learn from others. So before we get into the games, though, I really want to kind of get into this Thing 12. Like when I first read that, I'm like, is this Thing 1, Thing 2? Like what is this? Where'd this name come from?
Each one has a number on it. So the way this came about is my partner is Sean Harold. So, and we've worked together at various companies, and people started calling us Thing 1 and Thing 2 because we're named the exact same thing. And when we were trying to come up with a name for our company, when we decided let's do this, we were like, well, okay, Thing 1 and Thing 2 are kind of an owned IP. Like we don't want to upset get sued. That would be terrible. So we thought, well, what about Thing 12? Kind of like the idea of mashing those things together. We're both in Seattle, so there's sort of a 12th man, Seahawks kind of vibe going on. So our colors are green and blue. So it just all kind of worked together in a nice little marriage.
That's cool. So this started in 2006. Now, were you guys working on games before 2016? Like, is that when you officially formalized, or is it kind of when you started?
When we formalized as an LLC, we'd actually been working on a title before that. So we were kind of like working on things like, okay, well, now we need to actually like take the next step, get this all in order if we want to actually put something together on Kickstarter.
And what was that title that you're working on? What was that?
That was Dirty Cops, a game for scoundrels.
Dirty Cops, I love it.
Yep. And it was our interesting first dip into the Kickstarter world because it wasn't going to fund. And that was a tough nugget to chew, but we learned so much from it. And it allowed us to take a better step forward and actually put out a game. And we did really well with it. And we showed backers, hey, we know what we're doing and we're going to deliver you a really high quality product that you're going to have fun with.
So that Dirty Cops game, so you actually did put it on Kickstarter. So it actually went on, did you pull it, or you didn't hit your funding goal?
We pulled it before we hit the funding goal, which is actually something that I often recommend to Kickstarter backers. Like if you see your game's not going to fund, to go ahead and cancel it. That's fine. Yeah. There's a bit of a stigma when you look at something and it's like not funded, like, oh, well, what's wrong with this game? Versus canceling, that shows that you're aware of problems and you need to go in and figure out, okay, what was the problem? What do we need to fix? And for ourselves, really, it was way overproduced. We were asking for more than really what people were comfortable doing for a first-time Kickstarter creator. So we're like, okay, well, people are a little trepidatious with us. They don't really trust us because they don't know us. So what if we do something smaller, something more manageable? And that's how we got Dice of Crowns, because it was a smaller product. We could really just, laser focus on it and just make it shine.
I think it's interesting perspective when you kind of articulate it that way, that people from the outside looking in, it almost signals to them that you're self-aware. Yeah. I haven't heard that before. That's actually quite astute, because it's true. If you see something that did not fund, the question is usually, okay, what happened? Why did it fail? Why didn't they pull the chute? Like obviously they knew they weren't going to hit it. Why didn't they pull the chute? And I think that, quite frankly, if you're halfway into your campaign, you have a good idea if this is going to be a massive, epic uphill climb, or if you're going to hit your target. And people that just kind of stick it out, it could be for lack of awareness, right? Or just not seeing kind of the trees through the forest. So what surprised me, though, is when you came back at it, though, you didn't come back at it with Dirty Cops. Quite frankly, I'm looking at your 5 game list, and not one of them is called Dirty Cops. So what happened to that game?
It's still around. I've actually been kind
Okay.
of working with it, and there's some redesigns that I've been doing to kind of streamline it a little bit, but also like just the time right now. When it was out, it was an okay time for it.
Yeah.
There were some people that were like, "Well, are you saying cops are bad?" I'm like, "No, that's not the purpose of this game. That you're bad. You're these monster cops in the game, and you're doing kind of duplicitous things. You're all working together against these
Yeah.
bad guys, these criminals, but you're also kind of against each other. So everybody's just a terrible person in this game." But
Everybody's dirty. Maybe that's
everybody's
the new
dirty.
title.
Yeah.
Everyone's dirty. Could be the next
Everyone's
title of the
dirty.
game. Who knows? That's part two. And what were you guys doing before this? So you and Sean, thing one and thing two, or thing 12. Um, have you been like kind of lifelong friends? Have you, or did you know each other
Gosh,
just basically through business? Or
we met when we were working at the same video game company. So he and I are both video game producers, and we've
oh,
been
cool.
producers for a long time. Um, I got into the video game industry back in '98.
Okay.
Yeah, '98. Working at Electronic Arts as a tester. Huzzah!
Nice.
Way back.
It's not a small company. Yeah.
Yeah, they had a presence over in Seattle for a while there. So yeah, that was my intro. But we were working at a company called Kryptonite Games, and we were making handheld titles. And we just both happened to be working in the same place. And producers started talking to each other. We just became really good friends. He's a really cool guy, and I, just got along really well with him. And we're an interesting kind of yin and yang, like where he's a lot more like focused on. The financial side of creative endeavors and that thing. I'm more focused on like the crazy, like weird design ideas types of creative endeavors. So
Yeah.
we're a really good pairing that way. We kind of balance each other out.
And then and it was on kind of on the job. Like, were you both playing board games together at the same time? Like, were you saying, hey, by the way, like how that, just kind of trying to figure out how that kind of conversation and spark starts, right?
It was actually really interesting. So we had left, both of us had left Kryptonite Games. We went to a different company called Big Fish Games. And
Okay.
while we were working there, that's when Kickstarter was really starting to kick up, and pardon the pun. And I'd been looking at Kickstarter and been backing a couple things. I've been playing some board games off and on, doing a lot of Magic the Gathering. That was my big exposure and focus. Um, and as I was looking at Kickstarter, I was looking at it from the creative side. Like, how are people really engaging with their audience? What kind of things are they doing visually? What are they doing to really bring people in and keep them engaged and create that interest that I want to come back and see how the project's going? And I want to tell other people about it. He was looking at it from the financial side, like, okay, what are they doing as far as like their costs? What are they doing as far as making the different pledge levels, and what are their goals, and why do they have those specific numbers? So we were looking at the same thing, but from two very different avenues. And at one point, I had started working on Dirty Cops just as I needed to do something creatively where I had more control, because it takes a lot of different people to get a video game together.
Yeah, of course.
This was
Long
something I
time
could
too.
just kind
Yeah.
of work on myself, right? So I've been working on this. I'm like, yeah, it'd be kind of cool to put this on Kickstarter. I started talking to him like, hey, I've been looking at this Kickstarter thing, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I've been doing the exact same thing, but from this angle. And then when we talked, we're like, why don't we work together? Because we really love each other,
Yeah.
and try and do this together and really focus on this thing. We know a lot of different artists. We know a lot of different illustrators. We can make this happen. And we did. We actually put something together, and it really amazing, really super cool art. And I want the game to come out, but now it's more of just waiting for a time when the audience is ready. And I don't think that's where we're at right now.
So you guys have actually thought of even on like video games, like doing video games as well, or just been primarily board games?
We don't really want to go down the video game route, because we do that during the day anyways. So we
I
really
got you.
kind of satiate that desire there, and we don't really want to compete with the companies that we're working with either.
Conflict of interest, right?
Yeah,
That's interesting, right? Like you would, people looking kind of in from the outside would think, oh gosh, you got two guys who produce games, just do a micro game. Or an app, that maybe this could be something natural for them. But I get it. People that are on, computers all day, the last thing you want to do when you get home is get on another computer, right? In your spare time, you almost need something to kind of decompress and escape kind of the day to day. And and creatively stimulate you too, and learn new things. So that's pretty cool. So let's talk about some of those games. So the first game that kind of was Dice of Crowns, I guess, was the first one that you hit,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so how did that come about? Was that your creation? Was that someone else's creation? How Dice of Thrones, where'd that come from?
Dice of Crowns was a game by our designer friend Badger Roulette, and he and I had been playing games during our lunch break. We would bring things in and do stuff, and he was a test lead at the time, and he and I were both working at Big Fish, and um, he came to me and he was like, "Hey, check out this game that I made." He had a 3D printer, so he had printed out all these dice, and we sat down, we played it, and apparently he was traveling back and forth between Seattle and Portland a lot, and he would just come up with different game designs while he's driving. His mind needs something to do
Yeah.
while he's driving. So anyway, he came up with this thing inspired, kind of loosely inspired off Game of Thrones, this sort of like really backstabby, dice chucking game. And it was really cool. I really liked it. And at this point, we had already canceled Dirty Cops. So we were trying to figure out, okay, well, what do we want to do to move forward? Well, then Badger comes along and he presents me this game that is compact, it's small, it has a lot of player interactivity. It's something I hadn't seen before because it has players engaging with each other on each other's turns. So there's no downtime. And I'm like, I really, really dig this. And I've been talking with some people. I could get art involved in this and we could make this happen. And he was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Let's do this. So, and he knew Sean as well. So we all had a very positive relationship with each other. And yeah, so we started, got some people together and made it happen.
And it was quite successful. I think you did, was like a $20,000-$30,000 campaign, I believe, right? Was when I was
Yeah.
checking the numbers. And so how did you build up to that level? Like what were some of the key things that, for your first campaign, that's pretty good. Was it learnings you carried over from your prior campaign, or how did you get to that level?
Definitely the learnings that we had from before definitely played into it. But we did a lot of groundwork. We spent, oh gosh, I think more than a year working on that game. And part of it was working with a group called Playtest Northwest here in the Seattle area. And what they would do is they would go to different cons, and there's a lot of cons in the Seattle area. They would be there and you could just sit down and playtest with folks and get their input. So we would do that, and we would ask people, if you're interested in the game, please leave your email address. We'll let you know when it goes on Kickstarter. So we built up a really strong email list that way. There was also a contest, a gaming contest, design contest called the Lucy Awards. And so we submitted this game for that. It got a lot of positive buzz and people really enjoyed it. And it ended up winning the Player's Choice Award for that con. And, that was another big push for us. And then going out and doing interviews and, going out and doing, in-person interviews and doing online interviews and talking with people, and we sent it out to different reviewers. So we printed out a bunch of prototypes. Like there's just so much back work that you need to do to make sure that people are going to be aware of it.
So you had 1,920 backers, which is not a small number. That's a pretty decent campaign. In Canadian dollars, that's like 38,000. I'm not sure what that is in US, but fairly successful campaign. I like the concept for people listening. It's everything fits in a little mint tin. That's kind of the idea, right?
Yeah.
So your dice, your player tokens. There's actually a little crown. So I guess you're actually fighting for the crown, are you? Is that what that is? Or
yeah,
that's pretty cool. And so you took that learning, and then so when I was looking at kind of the 5 campaigns over 4 years, that's a lot of games that you guys have kind of cranked out quickly. Was it moving? Did you move very fast in the click boom? Was that a quick transition, or like what then got you to kind of get to the next game?
So we really spent a lot of time focusing on Dice of Crowns and getting that. Once we got out of the Kickstarter phase of that and worked into starting doing, okay, now we got to focus on the production side. There's a whole ton of work you got to do on the back end now. I was able to kind of start putting a little more of my attention on some different ideas that I had. And I was listening to a podcast one day as I was driving between work and home, and they were talking about, it was Eric Lang actually talking with one of the places up in Canada. I can't remember it right now, but he was talking about games that have that sort of a bluffing element. And then I had recently heard about a game that where you expose your hand of cards to everybody, and it's a
Mhm.
cooperative game. And players they can't communicate with each other directly. They have to do kind of this offhand communication.
Mm.
So I like that idea, but I didn't want it to be a cooperative game. So I thought, well, what if you could see everybody's else's hand of information? You had perfect information around you, but you didn't know your own. And people can just say whatever they want, and they're actively working against you.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a really interesting design space. And so I put together some cards and thought, well, what does it work at? What sort of thing applies to that from a thematic standpoint? And the idea of kind of a Russian roulette type of game. And so I went out and I play tested it, and it was really fun. So I just kept working on it. So while we're working on getting Dice of Crowns out to people, I'm actually working on, getting this game going. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And were you able to, so how far after Dice of Thrones was the Click Click Boom launch? Was that like a 6-month window or a year? Or how long did that take?
I believe Dice of Crowns was about a year before Click Click Boom. So because we also won the Player's Choice Award for Click Click Boom as well
Oh,
when we
nice.
had submitted to Lucy Awards. So that was really fun.
And then were you able to carry over like the people that like your 1,920 backers on your Dice of Crowns? Were you able to carry any of those people over to Click Click Boom, or how did you transition or try to, you know, leap off or lunge off of your prior success on your campaign you had before that?
Well, we knew that people were going to need to get their game first. So we got those out to backers before we put anything on Kickstarter, because again, we had to prove ourselves,
Yeah.
and we want people to see, okay, this is the kind of quality we can expect, and this is how it's going to go. We got some backers from Dice of Crowns, but we didn't have as many as we were hoping to get. We had just crested over the funding level when it shut down.
Mm.
Um, there's an interesting thing with it, that it's a really fun party game, but whenever we demo with people, they absolutely have a blast, and they buy it, and they take it home, and they have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
But for some reason, just sitting there, it doesn't sell as well just from the cover, which is it's interesting. So that's something we've been trying to like, okay, well, what kind of lessons can we take away from there? There's always things that you can learn, from whatever mistakes happen or whatever. 'Cause, I mean, the game was produced great.
Yeah.
The car quality is really good. The art's really attractive. It's not bloody or gory at all, so it's something you can actually play with your family and friends. So
Yeah. Yeah. And did you use the same artist for all your work, or did you use different artists, or?
we had a different artist do the actual character work for the game,
Okay.
and then we work with someone named Darren Michelson, and he does a lot of the illustrative work for us.
Mm-hmm.
So he actually took the artist that did all the animals and whatnot, took their art and actually created the box art and some of the illustrations for some of the inner pieces. Like he did all the coins, things like that. And we worked with another illustrator that actually did the card layout. So there's 2 or 3 different people that we routinely kind of work with.
I'd say that like your artwork across all your games is really nice.
Thank
So
you.
it's very very polished and obviously very professionally done. Um, so then your next game was then your Dice Pirates. So was it kind of like nostalgia of, we didn't fund as much as we did with the Dice of Dice of Crowns. So now we're going to take another kick at Dice, or how did that one come about then?
When we were working on Dice of Crowns, when we were like, yeah, this is good, this is going to do well for us, um, it's a really fun game. We're always looking like, is there something we can do with this title for a long-term span? And we were already talking about like, well, what would the next title be? So before Dice of Crowns was even fully funded, and on Kickstarter, we knew that we were going to be doing a pirate game.
Mm.
So it was just a matter of, getting these other games out and positioning it, give it time to kind of bake out in the public, and then put out Dice of Pirates. And we knew we wanted to come up with, what are the design pillars? What are the things that have to be in a Dice of game, so that when someone comes into it, they're not like, what is this crazy thing? It says Dice of Pirates, but it plays completely unique.
Yeah.
There has to be some unique elements, but there also had to be some things that were the same. And, Badger and I spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth, figuring out what that was, and then, working on the game and making sure it was fun and felt interesting and unique, but also didn't feel completely out of the blue.
So is the plan to create like a franchise out of that, these kind of Dice of games? So you have the tin box, you've got your kind of, main element, whether it be a crown or a ship that comes in the tin, and then the tokens and so forth and the dice. Is that something you guys are going to plan to kind of continue on, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've done that with all of our Kickstarters as well. So in Dice of Crowns, when we sent it out to backers, we included a card. And on the card, it said coming soon, Dice of Pirates.
Oh, cool.
So when people got Dice of Pirates, the card that we included said coming soon, Dice of Dragons. And that's the one that we've been working on. We had a prototype that went out. We sent it out to some reviewers. We got some feedback, and some of the feedback wasn't as good as we were hoping. And so that was a great learning experience. Like, okay, we thought this game was kind of dialed in, but we've got some things we need to work on. So let's pull it back. Let's do some reconfiguring and redesigning. And we have, and I think the game that we have is leaps and bounds better than what we had when we sent the earlier prototypes out.
And then after your Dice of Pirates came the Seals of Cthulhu, and then from the Seals of Cthulhu, then into Dinos Not Assembled. On the Dinos Not Assembled, what I found very interesting on the page is there is I think a 9-year-old kid, Dawson
Yep.
or something that was the name,
Yeah.
that actually created this game with his mom. Like, what's
Yep.
the story behind that?
That was such a fun story. So we were at one of the cons, and we knew Dawson's mom. She's a really great lady, Alice Davis, and her husband. We see them at the cons all the time. We game together, and she had been showing some different publishers this game that her son came up with, and just some dinos on some cards, and they had some bones on cards as well, kind of a compact card game. And she eventually showed us, and we're like, this is really cool. This, for a game put together by your son, she gave him some guidance and, helped him kind of along as almost like a producer, level. It was really fun and interesting. And we loved the story that anyone can be a designer with, that the right approach, the right open mind to look at things and being able to reiterate on stuff. So we're like, yeah, we'd like to sign this. We have some really cool artists that we know that we think would be a great fit for it, but we want to take this not from a simple card game. We want to expand on this. We want to make this something really cool that will look awesome on the table, something really captivating for kids to see, and something that's going to be engaging for parents as well as the kids, right? So it's one thing if your kid's like, hey, let's play this game. Like, oh God, not that game again.
Yeah.
We want something that we knew that parents would be like, yeah, that's fun. Let's have fun together. And we set it out in playtesting, the big prototype that we made, and parents, or not even just parents, like teens and stuff, would come along and play it, and they would get so vicious in the game, but they would have fun. And that's just awesome that you're seeing these kids that are like way outside the bounds of what you're sort of targeting, still having fun with it.
How do you handle, I guess, the feedback part of that process, being you're producing these games and you've got a kid who's a kid, right? That's created the game. Obviously there's going to be some input from you guys, right? So you didn't just take the game and throw it. Like you're obviously gonna make sure it's polished and everything before. Right. How did you go about handling that communication so that, the confidence and so forth is kind of preserved with the kid while you're dealing with them, but at the same time injecting, that polish. How did you handle the balance of that?
So we let Alice handle the whole, like,
that's mom.
Yeah, it's mom.
Okay.
We would give her feedback, but we would also give her constructive information behind it. Like, here's why, or here's an issue that we're seeing. Here's some things that we think might benefit in fixing this problem. And she does a great job in how she interacts and works with them. Their entire family plays board games all the time, so I think cool. He's used to seeing his mom go back and rework things and reiterate on things. So it wasn't completely foreign to him as a concept.
Yeah.
And I think that probably helped make him a little more open to it, rather than just like, oh, this is terrible, you need to fix this. More like, some people are having some problems, so here's some things that we can do to fix this. We want to make
Yeah.
this a better experience for them.
What would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you've encountered, or what is the biggest challenge? So you've now done 5 campaigns, which is a lot. Congratulations.
Thank you.
The numbers for anybody who's listening, I actually tallied everything up the other day, and you've in total across your 5 campaigns, 4,531 backers, and on $115,000 in total, which is
It's crazy to think about.
which is crazy. So that's a huge number when you kind of put them all together like that. What's the biggest learning you would say?
The biggest learning is, for me, I would say never be afraid to fail. Failure, people look at that word failure and they hear it and they get terrified. But if we hadn't have failed, quote unquote, with Dirty Cops, then Dice of Crowns wouldn't have been where it was. If you can't learn from failure, then you've got problems.
Yeah.
But failure is just like one of the major steps that you're going to be taking in order to make something better. And that's what game design really is. Like, you come up with an idea. Perfect example. Seals of Cthulhu. That was a game that the original game that I created, I hated. It was terrible. So bad that I got done, I played it, I'm like, this is garbage. I'm going to put this away. And I nearly threw it away. Instead, I'm like, whatever, I'll just put these aside. I'll reuse the cards later. About a year later-ish, I happened to be looking through some stuff. I found it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this hot piece of garbage. And then a moment of inspiration just appeared in my head, and I thought, I know how to fix this. I think I know what this is missing. And so I ran to the table, quickly fixed a bunch of stuff, and headed off to the game day that I was going to. And I'm like, okay, before we play stuff, I need you guys to play this with me. I think this is going to fix some problems. We played it.
Yeah.
It was broken and all that kind of stuff, but the fun was there, and that was what was missing. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I have a base that I can work off now. I've fixed the major hurdle. This is no longer hot garbage. This is fun. This needs to be polished and tweaked and modified, but this is fun. And that's what I was missing. So
it's interesting that the whole kind of, learn from failure, I think, is important. And I'm not sure if it's Jamie Stegmaier or there's someone in the industry said their model now is fail fast.
Yeah.
Fail fast. Try to get to that fail moment as fast as you can in the process so that you can more quickly iterate back up to kind of come up with the best product possible. And there's going to be issues, right? Every game you launch, you've done 5, I guarantee every single one's had problems. That's just the whole fun of creating games and publishing them, right? So it's trying to find out what are those failure areas or those things that you need to break quickly so you can get to that next iteration faster. And I think that's kind of a cool process. What's your next? Do you have another game? So you've got the Dice of Dragons coming up. Is there another game coming, or what's?
We have a bunch of games that we're working on. I had no doubt. I think we've got about 6 active projects at various stages in development right now. Yeah. There's a couple that I'm working on that are myself that are way too early to even bother talking about. There's a game that we're working on that we are looking to put. We want to do just a straight manufacture, and we're considering contacting people like, Target and Walmart and stuff like that. Like actual kind of a mass market game, but kind of like more like a hobby level mass market game. It's really fun. We've been playtesting with people, and largely the feedback is, this is fantastic. I wish I could buy it right now. So and these are people that look at mass market style games and look at that sort of approachability. So been getting really good stuff on that. We're working with, there's another game that we're working on that's in the Seals of Cthulhu universe. Okay. So when we did that game, we wanted to create a universe around it. And this next game is going to be different than the Seals of Cthulhu, but will be kind of like an artifact from that world. If that makes sense.
Yeah. That's cool. So so if people want to follow or they want to kind of link in or, follow along in the journey with you as you do these games, how best do they do that? Is there like a preview link that you have for your next game that coming out, or a Facebook page? How best do they do that?
So we don't have a preview link for the Kickstarter yet. There's some things that we still need to get done from a prototype level, so we can start sending it out. But if you want to follow us on Facebook, it's Thing 12 Games. If you want to look us up on Instagram, it's Thing 12 Games. And if you like horrible dad jokes and lots of talk about games, then follow us on Twitter at Thing 12 Games as well.
That sounds super easy to find. So, Sean, I just want to thank you so much for coming on this podcast. It's been educational for me. I'm excited to see the next game come from you guys. Obviously, you guys are on a roll and you're having a lot of fun doing it. So I want to wish you all the best, and you take care. Cheers.
Take care. Thank you.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply join the Facebook group Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.